Welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not News with Beth and Elizabeth. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hey.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'd be better if the intro was different.
Well, you have a project.
Anyway, how's it going, Beth?
Good. I thought it would be fun to do a new segment at the top of the show today called Wow and Fuck.
That sounds awesome. And it sounds just about right. Sounds right, spot on for our content.
Probably. So I wanted to let our listeners know that we found out something since the last episode. People, get your resumes ready. Project Veritas is hiring.
Oh, woohoo. You think your boss sucks.
What is that
for this duplicitous piece of shit?
Right? I mean, it just makes you really go, wow. Oh, fuck.
See?
So a friend of the pod, who I'm not going to name just in case this works out, let us know about this and had the great idea of applying for the job to do an undercover investigation on Project Veritas.
I think that is a fantastic idea.
It is. So if you or somebody you know doesn't have a podcast where they've already publicly slammed Project Veritas and knows how to set up a fake identity, etc., or wants to do this, we say go for it. Bring down Project Veritas with actual undercover reporting ethics. And by reporting on the actual things that they go on there and not making up situations to make them look bad, I figure 2 days tops. All it take there.
That long? Really?
Well, I guess I'm just not sure of the time frame on letting your new person in on your nefarious plans.
Well, you might get lucky. He might call you and leave a voicemail message and lay out his nefarious plans.
Maybe with your job offer.
Yes, exactly. So you might just stumble into it and then you'll have everything you need and you won't even have to leave the house.
You might not even have to start. Nice.
Well, have we apologized for anything lately?
Not in a few episodes, I think, because we're perfect. We make zero errors, and everybody thinks that everything we do is perfect, so no apologies necessary.
Well, that's good. I'm glad we don't have to do that segment, because we are not going to disgrace our very special guest, Nick Byrd. Hi, Nick.
Hey.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks. And thanks for not disgracing me. It's very, very appreciated.
Oh, the day is young. The day is young, Nick.
There's time.
We've only just begun.
Well, before we get too far, we can't forget to talk about who we are and why you're listening to this.
So we're Beth and Elizabeth. This is I Can't Believe It's Not News, a podcast about fake news.
Correct. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Podcast Fake News. And you can also email us at podcastfakenews@gmail.com, just in case you don't make it all the way to the very, very end of the podcast where we finally say that.
I was going to say, I'm liking this, Beth. We get this out of the way early because we have a tendency to forget to talk about that important stuff at the end.
We do. We want people to listen to us, but not know where to find us.
We are mysterious.
Totally. So, Nick, you're actually the mysterious one here right now because people don't know who you are. So tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm at Florida State University. I'm a PhD candidate. I'm in the philosophy department, and I also work in the psychology department. And basically, I study reasoning, and in particular, like differences between the ways that we reason and what that tells us about differences in our beliefs and other things. So,
well, we actually found you. We had emailed you before the podcast even started, and you were nice enough to email us back. And that freaked me out a little bit. So I waited like 2 months to email you again because I was like, I don't want to seem too, I don't want to just email right back.
Though. We didn't even have content.
No, we were like,
we could have just been like lunatic assholes, and you were so nice.
I'm willing to take risks, and plus it just seemed like a great idea.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the blog that you had posted, and that's how I found you, actually. You had posted a blog about fake news and defining it. So I wanted to ask you about your blog and why you wrote that one and what led you there. Yeah,
so in general, I blog about like anything that's related to my research about reasoning and stuff like this. So the election, the 2016 election, as someone who studies reasoning, was like fascinating. Mm-hmm. But it was also kind of demoralizing as well, because I'm someone who wants to also teach good reasoning. So there was like plenty of instances of just like outrageous reasoning that was pretty disappointing to witness. And so, one of the things that came out of this election is this idea of fake news and how it's being used to discredit or sow distrust among the public. And so I thought, this is related to my research somehow, and it'd be nice to kind of get clear on what we mean by fake news, and maybe set some ground rules for how we should discuss fake news and discuss news in general, and discuss news with one another, especially with people we disagree with. So that's kind of the motivation for the post.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about your reasoning research. I think you mentioned in our correspondence before this podcast about reflective reasoning and unreflective reasoning.
Yeah, so the best way to kind of cash out the difference between reflective and unreflective reasoning is to just ask a simple question. So the question is this: a bat and a ball cost $1.10 in total. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. So how much does the ball cost?
I can't answer that because I listened to another podcast that you were on.
Oh.
And I would have answered it wrong. So I will answer it the way I would have answered it. I would say, so it's 10 cents.
Yeah, so that's the answer that most people...
But that's wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, that's wrong.
Because it's $1 more. So if the ball was 10 cents, then the bat would be $1.10. See, so it needs to be...
5 cents.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can ask people these questions, and the idea behind these questions is there's this answer that just kind of jumps out at you as obviously correct. Some people call this the intuitive answer. But the thing about these answers is they're demonstrably false. Math just shows that they don't fulfill the requirements of the question. So the idea is that people who answer, or when we answer the intuitive response, the suggestion is that we haven't really reflected very carefully on our answer. We just had some sense that this particular answer seemed correct and then reported that answer, as opposed to reflecting on that answer and maybe double checking our work or something. So these types of questions are used to distinguish between reflective and unreflective reasoning.
So how do you think that corresponds to fake news?
Yeah, so this definitely seems connected in the sense that you're on Facebook and you're presented with a headline. And let's say you're a liberal leaning person, and the headline is very critical of the Trump administration, which is something that a liberal-leaning person would maybe be inclined to accept. And so without reflecting on it, maybe without even reading the article, you then share that post.
Yeah.
And so that's a rather unreflective action, right? You just saw a headline that seemed correct. You didn't double check it. You didn't do any fact checking. You just shared it. That's an unreflective interaction with news. And so where this comes up with fake news is, let's say it's a fake headline. Of sorts, and you've just spread fake news. And the idea here is that you did that unreflectively, and I think the idea might be if you had reflected on it and maybe done some fact checking or looked into the credibility of the source or something like this, you might not have shared it and then maybe would have prevented fake news from spreading. Or maybe you would have shared it and told people, hey guys, this is fake news. So you would have actively undermined the fake news or something like that.
I feel like our podcast is reflective on steroids.
That's why I love this podcast, because it's it is just a huge exercise in reflective reasoning and what to do about this new phenomena. It's great.
It is the biggest uphill battle you cannot begin to imagine. Seriously.
It really is. I was actually a little intimidated. I was how much research should I be doing for this podcast? Because it seems like there's almost no end to the amount of news and fake news and and other things going on. I just thought I'm probably not going to be up to date. But hopefully you guys.
Oh, No, see, you're the one who does all of the research because we are just like fighting the small battles, but you're the one who's researching the why of it. And that's the important part because we play whack-a-mole. That's all we do. And it's insane.
It's a lot sometimes. And I know, I remember when we were talking about starting this podcast, one of the reasons why we ended up starting it is because I couldn't really find anybody else doing this. There's a lot of people who've done episodes on fake news, but I wasn't really finding, at least in my searches, I couldn't find another podcast about fake news. And there's so much to talk about. I mean, I don't really think we're ever going to run out of topics. And I have found there's today, what we're going to talk about today was something I had never thought of before. Mm-hmm. Never had even crossed my mind or occurred to me that this could be going on. So there's so many facets out there of fake news that kind of, it's just interesting and they keep popping up and I'm just learning more and more. So yeah. So Nick, we were wondering, instead of just asking you questions and doing like a straight interview, we thought it would be fun to just have you kind of guest with us today and review some articles with us.
Sounds fun. I'm up for it.
Okay, perfect. Well, that's good because if you weren't, we were going to be like, oh, well, I guess bye.
Cancel the show.
So in knowing that we were going to talk to Nick, I wanted to look up and see if there was anything going on in academia with kind of fake news. And I guess not very surprisingly, there is.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, the first one I want to talk about, there was a New York Times article by Kevin Carey, and this is from December 29th of 2016, and it's called A Peek Inside the Strange World of Fake Academia. And he says, basically, he got a call from somebody saying, do you want to participate in the 15th World Cardiology and Aniology Conference in Philadelphia next month? And he says, do I have to be a doctor? Because he's not one. And they said, oh no, you can have the student rate. And he's like, it's in a couple of weeks. Do I have enough time to submit a paper? Again, he knows nothing about the subject. And they said it would be approved on an expedited basis and asked what credit card he would like to use. So this is a company called OMICS International. I don't know if they pronounce it by letter or if they say Omics. I'm not sure. Nick, have you ever heard of this?
I've not heard of this one, but I've had some similar emails, not phone calls.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, this is a company that promotes the open journal. I believe that's what they call it, publications. And they also do conferences. And it's basically a pretty fraudulent business where they will put up these conferences and say that people are going to be there speaking that have no intention of being there or don't even know that they're being listed as keynote speakers. And then you have to pay to publish in their journals. And so they'll basically take anything and anybody and publish you. Now, Nick, can you tell us a little bit about in academia why you want to publish and why you'd want to go to these conferences?
Yeah, so in general, you cannot get a job and you cannot be promoted unless you're publishing on a regular basis. And so, when people are reviewing resumes, or they're called CVs in academia, but resumes, they're literally looking at like how many publications you have. And they're also, I guess, trying to determine the quality of those publications, but the number probably matters to some degree. And if you have no publications, or if you haven't had publications in a while, then you're not very hireable and you're certainly not promotable. And then there's this idea of tenure in academia. And the idea is at some point after getting a job, after a few years, you're reviewed for tenure. And if you don't pass your tenure review, then you can be let go. It's not just like you're either promoted or not. It could be like you're either promoted or fired. And so there's a great deal of incentives around publishing your work. And so, if you're feeling maybe anxious about how much you have or haven't published, and you see this kind of like really nice, easy opportunity to publish something and maybe improve your job prospects, it'd be pretty tempting to take that.
For only $599.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
if you think about like $199 to secure income for the next however many years, like, yeah, I'll do that, right? So the temptation is strong. I think though, I would say that most people who are hiring and reviewing people for tenure are pretty aware of which journals are the credible ones. If I was to give this to give some no-name journal to my supervisor and say, hey, should I publish here? He'd be like, I never even heard of that journal. You should definitely not publish that because I've never even heard of it. The worry here is smaller than it's made out to be.
Well, and I think that as it relates to fake news, is that the public doesn't know which journals are credible and which ones aren't. And so if you say, oh, this article was published in, whatever, and like, oh, wow, okay. So we think that they're all legitimate, peer-reviewed journals and peer-revered journals, actually, too.
Yeah.
That, too. And it has a gravity that goes with it that isn't appropriate all the time.
Well, and then you have people like Andrew Wakefield, who I have stopped saying the doctor in front of because
as well you should, right?
Have been stripped. And thank you, John Oliver, for pointing that out.
Yes.
But people like him that go to give talks to people who are just regular, not scientists, not involved in that, occupation, and they see his list of credentials, and if somebody's just trying to, give people fake scientific news, they could publish in all these journals and be like, I'm published in here, 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 and here. And that's going to look impressive to somebody who doesn't know better.
Well, and shit happens too. So that particular article that got him famous was published in The Lancet, and that is a serious, proper journal.
Sure. And I'm just using him as an example of somebody, a name recognition. But if somebody wants to go push and peddle their science, quote unquote, and they want to back it up with, look how many journals I've been published in to, make the average person think that they're awesome when they're not. They can just pay to publish in all these journals. And it looks like, so this company has like 600 journals.
Wow.
I'm trying to find it here. So the article says that they're definitely on the far end of the definitely fake spectrum. And real academia conferences evaluate potential participants by subjecting proposed papers and presentations to a rigorous peer review process. These are approved in less than 24 hours, and they don't list who is doing this peer review. And so it's just very like wham, bam, thank you, ma'am type review. If it's even being reviewed, because
it's just did your credit card go through?
Exactly.
I'll review
Exactly.
that. That's what I'm reviewing. I'm looking for that approved mark there.
So I want to read you this sentence, and Nick, maybe you can tell us if this makes any sense. Atomic physics and I shall not have the same problem with a separate section for a very long, long way. Nuclear weapons will not have to come out the same day after a long time of the year. He added, the two sides will have the 2 leaders to take the same way to bring up their long ways of the same as they will have been a good place for a good time at home, the United Front. And she is a great place for a good time.
Sounds like one of my high school papers.
Does that make sense, Nick?
It sounds like Siri is malfunctioning or something like that.
Well, Siri was not malfunctioning.
That's right. That's right.
That was written using the autocomplete feature on his iPhone by a New Zealand college professor who submitted that paper to OMICS sponsored International Conference on Atomic and Nuclear Physics. And it was accepted within 3 hours.
Wow, yeah, that's unheard of. You can't even get an editor to check the submission in 3 hours.
Yeah.
Most reviews take months.
His credit card must have been on, must have been good. So basically, they make money by getting people to pay to publish and also pay to go to these conferences that are just kind of BS. Like they're not good conferences. So
see, the conferences, man, I just really wonder about that. Like, what is that like for the people who go there and you're all just kind of milling about, I guess, and you don't have the speakers who are supposed to be there? How do you perpetuate that? How does that not get around that this is rubbish, don't go?
Well, I think, yeah, so a part of me wonders, like, if there's, like, some sort of unspoken agreement among people, like, hey, we won't tell people that this was, like, BS. And then I also wonder if there's, like, this, and, like, you know, if you actually went to this and presented there and it was obvious that it was BS, like, you wouldn't want to go advertising that you went to this conference, right? I mean, it's...
Right.
So it's a strange thing that this thing would be able to exist for more than, like, once. Like, that they could have a recurring conference just seems strange to me.
You know what? I think that you might have a good point too. They're also taking a step further. I wonder if there's embarrassment. Like, my article was published in this journal and I went to this conference and now I know it's a sham. I don't want everyone else to know that I fell for this. So I'm just going to be quiet.
So listen to this. So this is something that the article says. It says, stacking multiple fake conferences at the same hotel is a common practice, says Jeffrey Beal, a tenured University of Colorado Denver librarian. He maintains a website for identifying predatory open access scholarly publishers that masquerade as scholarly journals, but are actually in the business of pumping out worthless articles and exploiting scholars with hidden fees. And then he said, you just rent a hotel, make up a name, and stand around while everyone is reading their papers. Mr. Bill says it's easy money. So he had this website where he was listing the fake publishers. Now, you guys said earlier, you're like, there can't be that many of them, right? They would not work. Well, from 2011 to when this article was published, which, what did I say? 2016. The list had grown up to 923 publishers from 18.
Wow.
So I clicked on his website and it's gone. It's not there anymore. So I looked up and I found that, I found an article called Predatory Publishers, Why I'll Miss Jeffrey Beal. And this was published on January 25th of 2017. And it just says, last week we learned that scholarly open access Jeffrey Beal's website and blog has gone down. Beal, an academic librarian at the University of Denver, has earned fame and notoriety for his list of what he calls predatory open access publishers and journals. And it is still not clear what led to the demise of Beal's blog. There were rumors of possible legal threats. Now, I found that this OMICS publishing group, they had sent a letter to him in 2013 stating that they intended to sue him and were seeking $1 billion in damages. And in their 6-page letter, they stated that his blog is ridiculous, baseless, and impertinent, and smacks of literal unprofessionalism and arrogance. Bill said that he found the letter to be poorly written and personally threatening, and that he thought the letter is an attempt to detract from the enormity of their editorial practices. So this firm, OMICS, is in India, and they were pursuing damages under the Information Technology Act of 2000, Section 66A, which makes it illegal to use a computer to publish any information that is grossly offensive or has menacing character. And I got that from Wikipedia, by the way. That part is on the Wikipedia page about OMICS Publishing Group. There's no evidence that a lawsuit went forward or anything, and nobody really knows why he took down the blog, but he did, and it's gone.
So the moral of the story is, if you're going to do this thing, you better have a lot of money to be able to handle these threats of lawsuits and things like this.
Yeah. So this company, the OMICS, is a lot bigger than we would like it to be. They have bought other publishing companies, particularly one in Canada, that they had like 12 actual good journals. And since OMICS bought them, their reputation has gone down and people won't publish with them anymore because of their association with OMICS. OMICS can basically keep saying, nope, we're legitimate. We're a good source for people to publish with.
So back to what you were saying about, Nick, about just the imperative nature of publishing and how that impacts your profession. What do you think about that? It seems like there's more people trying to publish than there are legitimate journals to publish in.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, it's difficult to say like by exactly how much there is this surplus of academics, but it seems pretty uncontroversial that if we're supposed to be publishing, a paper every year or something like that, and there's thousands of academics, but not as many slots. There's not enough slots for every one of those academics to publish a paper every year. Then yeah, there's just a problem here about like a bottleneck in the system. And so one thought is, well, we just need to make more journals. And then, a response to that is, wait a minute, like maybe we should step back further and say, like, do we need more papers out there? Like, are there really benefits to having so much stuff published? And these are questions that you hear a lot of in academia. Like, hey, maybe we should care about publishing a little less. The trouble is, the people who are enforcing these publication standards aren't necessarily other academics. It's administrators at universities, and many times these administrators have no academic experience. They're just like middle manager type people who have kind of taken over some administrative position and take this like middle management type of mentality to faculty, which is like, look, we need to assess your performance somehow, and like this publication seems like a pretty straightforward way of assessing your performance, so we'll stick to that, even though they don't realize like maybe some of the deeper problems with this assessment structure.
But yours are awesome though, right? Your administrators are fantastic and don't suffer from any of that.
I'm not sure I can assent to that claim.
I'm trying to give you an out.
I hear you. The administrators in my department are fantastic. I can say that for sure.
It sounds like, honestly, publishing in academia should mean that you are kind of on the top of your game, that you are the best of the best, and not everybody can be the best of the best. Like, you're going to have cogs even in academia. And in order for you to get published as a cog, you might have to go to a lower known journal. You might have to pay to publish, in order to get up there.
Indeed.
Yeah, but I think that if you're the department, you want everyone to be the best of the best. So that's
not everybody can be the best of the best,
I think there are like people who are more or less prolific. I'm not sure that like that
sure.
that like corresponds to like intelligence or anything like that, but there are people who are just like pretty well known for cranking out papers and good papers rather quickly, and then other people seem to not be able to do that. And so yeah, I wonder if there's something to that. Like, maybe not everyone is the type of person that can just crank out papers over and over. The other thing you might think is like, well, higher education is about education. So like, to what degree is this publication assessment capturing the value of the education part as opposed to just the publication part? And so some people think we should prioritize publication less and prioritize education more. And so we should assess based on how well we're educating people, and maybe not assess so much based on how much we're publishing content.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to assess that. Yeah. And that's the question with education generally, whether it's at, your level or a high school level.
And actually, so that's another thing that faculty might have gripes about is the way we currently assess teaching. Because, currently a lot of that assessment is done by the students. And there's clear correlations between the grade that a student gets in a class and their rating of the professor. So like, if you get a C in a class, you're more likely to give the professor, whatever the C range is of their performance. But if you got an A, then you're likely to give the professor a pretty good rating. So like, there's some clear like biases in the assessment process.
Well, you guys are never going to believe this. I found an article by The Blaze.
I didn't even want to go there.
I'm excited.
There's some backstory here, but let's start with this. The Blaze, first of all, we haven't reviewed anything by them yet, so I want to go through here. This article is called Fake Academic Paper Published in Liberal Journal Hilariously Exposes the Absurdity of Gender Studies. This was published on May 21st of 2017 by Chris Enlow. I clicked on his name and saw some of the other articles that he has put out, and let me tell you, this guy is living in a different world than me. Everything in his world is very focused on Donald Trump winning. The Blaze is an American multi-platform news entertainment network that's available on television, radio, and internet, founded by talk radio personality and entrepreneur Glenn Beck, and is based in Irving, Texas. And I just want to take a moment and sympathize with our Texas listeners, because we actually have quite a few Texas listeners, that both Glenn Beck and Alex Jones are local in their area.
Yeah, I know Alex Jones is out of Austin. I didn't realize that Glenn Beck was in Texas too.
Apparently his studio at least is in Irving, Texas. So hang in there, guys. So media bias checker says that they have a right bias and their reporting is mixed. And some of their news stories and television personalities are not always factually accurate.
Really? Gosh.
I know. I was so shocked. Okay. So let's talk about this article. Let's see what we have here. A peer-reviewed academic journal was recently duped in a hilarious way. Two academics, and I'm probably going to say their names wrong, Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay. His is easy. It's the Boghossian. Whoever he is, recently used pen names to submit an academic paper to a peer-reviewed academic journal to expose the absurdity of modern gender studies by arguing that the male reproductive organ known as the penis is a social construct. So this 3,000-word paper was titled "The Conceptual Penis as a Social Construct" and was submitted and published to Cogent Social Studies Academia Journal in its May edition. They cited 20 sources in their paper, many of which were made up or never read. They had pen names Jamie Lindsay and Peter Boyle, and they were writing for the fictitious Southeast Independent Social Research Group. Here's the thing. This actually did happen. These guys did do this. They made up this paper and they submitted it, and it was published in that journal, the Cogent Social Service Sciences. What I don't believe about this article is that, like the headline says, that it exposed the absurdity of gender studies and that it was hilarious. Nick, you've read about this, right?
Indeed, and I've heard loads about it from colleagues.
So what's the chatter going on in academia about this?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, nobody takes this very seriously. At least they don't take this as a criticism of gender studies very seriously. They do, I think, take the other problem with this rather seriously. And the other problem would be the journal that accepted this on seemingly suspicious terms. So I think a lot of academics think like, yeah, that's pretty concerning that there's journals out there like that. But nobody's surprised that there's journals out there like that, because like I said, like you talked about this conference organization, and I've told you, like, I get emails that are about suspicious publishing opportunities. I think the consensus is gender studies is not marred by this, but maybe certain publications are.
You know, this reminds me, Elizabeth, of what we talked about in the last episode about the difference between actual undercover journalism and just being a jerk. Kind of what these guys did, they were trying to dispute gender studies as a science, basically. So they wrote this to try to like be a stain on gender studies and to show that it's not worthwhile. And it kind of just reminded me a little bit of like how James O'Keefe acts, where it's like he doesn't like something, so he tries to set it up to make it look bad. Mm-hmm. And just that, like, I think gender studies is needed, and it's a valuable science, and especially in this day and age where we're just starting to understand and explore more about humans and gender and sexuality. Like, that's not a bad thing to explore.
Mm-hmm. So well, I don't think, I mean, it's not a science. I mean, unless you're saying it's part of psychology.
Yeah, it's probably part of psychology and part of...
No, I mean, if it's part of psychology and like you're doing research on it, like I never took a gender studies course when I was in school. And I know there's psychology of gender, and that would be
I think it's
different.
probably interdisciplinary. So I think there are some sciences involved, but I think there's also some humanities involved, right? So like there's philosophy of gender, just like there's psychology of gender. And I think honestly, there are people who study, the kind of biological processes and how those might relate to people's gender identities. So it's probably an interdisciplinary field. But
sure,
I wonder if Lindsay and Boghossian would accept that interdisciplinary description of gender studies.
Yeah.
The definition does say, excuse me, gender studies is a field for interdisciplinary study devoted to gender identity and gendered representation as central categories of analysis. This field includes women's studies, men's studies, and queer studies.
So also, and I don't think it's in this Blaze article. I think it might be in the source material here. Don't remember where I saw it, but I believe that the letter that they got from the publication that they submitted it to originally said that this isn't appropriate for us, but you should submit to this, what is it, Cogent. Social Sciences. Yeah. And I think that they said, oh, that's just a form response.
So let's talk about that. So how did they get this published? Because what they had put together was just pure nonsense. And they tried to make it nonsensical. Like that was their goal.
That was the goal.
So I did find an article by Salon called Why the Conceptual Penis Hoax Was a Bust. It only reveals the lack of skepticism among skeptics. And this was published on May 22nd, 2017 by Phil Torres. I didn't find a lot of articles published about it. I found a lot of blog posts about it. And I was trying to find an actual article and not just a blog. And it was kind of hard to find an article. So it seems like it wasn't really covered as much in the news, but it was covered in academia with blogs. And Nick, I had sent you some of those blogs and you had said, oh, I already read this one. Like, this is something that you've been familiar with.
I haven't read the Salon one, though.
Yeah. So I want to go back to, there's actually a blog I want to talk about real quick by Slate. It's slate.com by Ruth Graham. And she brought forth some information that I thought was really interesting. So she talks about the fact that the journal where it was published wasn't where they originally tried to publish it. So they first submitted it to a journal called Norma, which is the International Journal for Masculinity Studies. They said, we thought it was sheer nonsense, and they rejected it. But per their company standards, in the rejection letter, the Norma editors suggested that it might be a better fit at the lower status journal Cognate Social Scientists, which it shares a publisher. They have since said that the recommendation was automatically generated by a company-wide referral system, and that they meant to reject it outright. So another blog that I found talks about this, that Cogent OA is part of the Taylor and Francis group. Now, Nick, have you heard of them?
Yeah, so Taylor and Francis is like a huge umbrella company that has like loads of journals underneath them. Like it's the equivalent of like, when you go to the grocery store, there's like one or two companies that make like loads of the products in all of the different aisles. Taylor and Francis is like one of those things. They have journals for like a whole bunch of different fields and just lots of them.
Now, would you be excited if Taylor and Francis accepted one of your papers into a journal?
It depends on which one of their journals. So like if it was their Cogent series, I would not. I would probably wouldn't even submit.
So basically, but Taylor and Francis and this other publisher, Routledge, they have a good reputation, right? Like normally you'd think good, right? So they have this company under them, the Cogent OA, which publishes the Cogent series of multidisciplinary digital open access journals. And this is a statement by them. Together, we provide authors with the option of transferring any sound manuscript to a journal in the Cogent series if it is unsuitable for the original Taylor and Francis Routledge journals, providing benefits to authors, reviewers, editors, and readers. So this is what the blogger says. So get this. If your article gets rejected from one of our regular journals, we'll automatically forward it to one of our crappy interdisciplinary pay-to-publish journals, and we'll gladly take you or your funders or institution's money to publish it after a courtesy, quote-unquote, peer review. And he said, this is a new one to me. There's a hoax going on here, all right, but I don't think it's gender studies that's being fooled.
Yeah. I wonder how much money they make.
It's apparently enough, because I mean, like that, if it wasn't that much money, they wouldn't be doing it. I don't think.
Yeah. So where's their cash flow coming from? Is it from the legit sources? And
yeah, it's a good question. So Taylor and Francis is one of the major. There's like 5-ish, maybe 6-ish huge companies like Taylor and Francis that just have loads of journals and loads of different disciplines. Some of those journals are considered like reputable, probably very few of them, but and what they do is they just charge university libraries an enormous amount of money to get access to all of the journals. And what that means is, like, as a student here or as a faculty member here, I can, via my university library, get access to Taylor and Francis's stuff. Now, those subscription fees per university are often like millions of dollars. So the university library pays Taylor and Francis, or companies like Taylor and Francis, millions of dollars to get access to all these journals, so that all of their students and faculty can have like unlimited access to papers and stuff. So that is one way that they can that's probably their main income source. But there is this open access thing that has changed some of that, and I think that's not being represented well in some of these articles. So that'd be worth talking about at some point.
So, well, tell us about that. What do you mean by that?
So let's say I do some research. Part of the research that I'm doing is funded by taxpayers' dollars, right? So like I go to a state school, and so the state provides some of the money for this research. And let's say I have a scholarship that's somehow state funded, like, the National Science Foundation or something like that. That means that my research was paid for by tax dollars. So it would be strange if, when I publish my research, the people who aren't at my university would have to pay to download or read this research, even though they've already paid for it with their taxes, right? So there's this movement known as the open access movement or open science movement. And the idea here is, among other things, we want to make our research publicly available. So the idea is that, like, anyone, whether they're a part of a university or not, can go to a journal's webpage and read and download the papers for free, because they've already paid for it through their tax dollars. But when you do that, obviously, these journal companies can't make nearly as much money, right? Now there's no reason to charge the university millions of dollars per university to pay for their stuff, because anyone else could get it for free. And so there's this cost problem, like, what are they going to do to continue making money? And so some people have just started completely new journals with completely new companies that are like nonprofit based to separate themselves entirely from these big companies. And then some of these big companies have tried to do this open access stuff. So they want to get in on this, like, socially responsible open access stuff. They want to be able to tell people, like, look, we'll make some of our articles open access so that we look like we're a socially responsible company. But in order to pay for that, they ask for the authors to pay for that. And authors, like, as a grad student, I don't have $1,500 to just to publish a paper.
Yeah.
But there are grants that I can apply for at my university to pay for these types of things. So, like, this is already a part of the grant and funding infrastructure in academia is this, paying your way to publish certain things. Now, there are some legitimate forms of paying to publish or open access paper. This is just clearly not one of them. This conceptual penis hoax is just clearly not one of those instances. And it's, like you guys have mentioned, like, it's difficult for someone who's not familiar with academia and these nuances to understand the difference between this pay to publish your open access paper and some other legitimate versions of paying to publish your open access paper.
Yeah, as when you're describing that, I'm like, oh, okay, so it's a nice thing. It's supposed to be giving more people access to read these papers and to not have it cost, so that I, as a just normal person who doesn't have access to a university library at this point in my life, if I wanted to read some of these articles, I could.
Exactly.
And that sounds like a good thing.
Yeah.
But then you've got the people swooping in to make money off of it.
Right.
And not have it be such a good thing. Very interesting.
Yeah, so I think that this article, the Salon article, brings up something important about how skeptics can sometimes have trouble being skeptical. I think that there's a lot of good that comes from skepticism. A lot of the things that, when we were talking about this, you're like, I didn't even go to that original article. That's that. And I'm like,
skeptic.
I'm like, oh, LOL. I used to have a subscription to Skeptic magazine.
I was like, oh, good. You go look it up.
I am a fan. And there's, a lot of good, a lot of really good stuff that comes from thinking skeptically about things and not taking things on face value and investigating before you accept. And that's what it's about. Right.
So, okay.
But the thing is, sometimes they're bad about it because they're people. Right. Sure. And it goes back to Nick's research. And do we just see something that we just accept unreflectively, or do we, spend more time thinking about it? What do you think, Nick?
Oh man, I think you put it really well. I'm a little jealous. No, I think that's a really good analysis of what the skeptical community's response to this was. I don't think it was indicative of careful reflection about it. I think it was more indicative of, this kind of fits my preconceived notions of gender studies. Therefore, I'm going to share this. And this is, like a lot of the biggest names in this community were sharing this stuff. Like Michael Shermer, and I think Sam Harris was sharing this. I think Sam Harris even mentioned this on his podcast with like gleeful delight. As he was, talking about how this is, just supposed to be really bad for gender studies, and they just failed to see how the fact that there was two variables that could be explaining the hoax. They failed to see how like that's a confound in the claim. So like it might be a problem for the journal or for gender studies, but it's not necessarily a problem for both.
So this seems like a case where people were trusting the source because it's a source that they normally can trust.
Right.
And that's where sometimes we do have to be careful, like, like in our last episode, we were talking about that CNN article. Like, we can't just blindly believe it just because of the publisher. You still have to be skeptical.
Yes, yeah. I spend way too much time running to Sam Harris's defense on things. I used to be like a massive fan of Sam Harris, and I'm stepping back from some of that, from some of my fangirl crush, because he does say things, and Richard Dawkins says things, and Michael Shermer certainly says things that are indefensible. But I think that at the heart of it, what they're espousing is what we want. We want people to think more critically about the things that they're presented with. That's what this whole fake news podcast is about, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's worth pausing on this for a second. So like, I kind of agree with you of your analysis on Sam Harris, for instance. Like, I think I have mixed feelings about him, but I think that he does well to challenge some of my preconceived notions. So like he has, for instance, like more recently challenged some like kind of liberal narratives and pointed out how they're problematic or maybe not fully reflective. And I have some liberal leaning tendencies. And so like that was helpful for me to point out maybe some faulty assumptions in my liberal leaning views. But at the same time, he is, like you guys were saying, as a human, apparently not immune to unreflective reasoning. And so, like it kind of points to the idea that like, look, no one is immune to this stuff. And I think it points out the importance of kind of being in multiple different communities, right? Because if we were just in the skeptic community, we might have had a very particular and potentially unreflective view of this hoax. But if we were in the skeptic community as well as some other communities that were more reflective about this thing, then we'd have a better view, and we'd be able to maybe kind of piece together the more reflective analysis of what happened with this paper publication about the conceptual penis. So I just had to make sure that I threw that in there.
I love like the serious tone.
The conceptual penis. Oh my God. I can't believe we're making you say this.
Okay, and this is going to be like really obscure, but does anyone remember the King Missile song, Detachable Penis, from back in the day? That's what I hear in my head. Conceptual penis. do conceptual penis. No, am I going there alone by myself?
You're alone on that, but I appreciate that was the first musical interlude that we've had.
I mean, that was the highlight of my day for sure.
Definitely. When I was emailing Nick this stuff, I'm like, is he going to be like, I really don't want to talk about penises with you guys, but thanks.
Well, but it's a conceptual penis, right?
Yeah, it's just a social construct, guys.
Yes, it's just this. Oh my God. I think you just named the episode. It's just a social construct, guys. That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, what do you think, guys? Have we covered this to death? Are we good?
I think we're good. You got anything you want to promote? Nick, you got any plugs?
I mean, I guess, like I have a website and I'm on social media, so maybe that's worth mentioning.
No, probably not.
Yeah, okay,
no.
Forget it. Yeah, we're done.
You have a blog?
Yeah, so the website is byrdnick.com, and that's byrdnick.com. And then you can, like, I have links to all my social media stuff, but I'm on Twitter and Facebook and the rest. I'm a true millennial.
What's your Twitter handle?
My Twitter handle is Byrd_Nick, and Byrd is BYRD.
I heard some news about you that I thought maybe you could confirm if it's true or fake. I heard that you are actually Neil Patrick Harris in disguise.
Yeah, I get that every time I go outside. Has anyone ever told you look like Neil Patrick Harris? And yes, every day.
I was reading your blog and I'm like, God, he looks so much like Neil Patrick Harris. I wonder if he gets that a lot. And then I scroll all the way down to the blog and it's like, and yes, I hear that all the time.
I mean, it's not an annoying thing, right? Because he's like super likable and like really talented. Like it would be frustrating perhaps if I looked like someone who was not so likable. But
like Donald Trump.
Oh gosh, I hadn't even thought of that.
Oh no.
Okay, so I have to
no, it's not as bad. What if you always got like, God, you look just like Scott Peterson. Do you ever hear that? Or something like that? That would be as bad as Donald Trump.
If you did look like Donald Trump, though, you've got a career to make a lot of money. Like you could retire early if you looked like Donald Trump, because like you would be the next SNL Donald Trump or the next.
Oh yeah.
Like, isn't there a Donald Trump TV show or something now with a guy?
There is on Comedy Central. Yeah, it's like a once a week. It's called The President.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe the time to look like Donald Trump is it's ripe. Now is the time.
So, have you ever given out an autograph to somebody posing as Neil Patrick Harris? Somebody who just like wouldn't let it go, and you were like, fine.
So no one's ever asked for an autograph. I can't say that, but here's something that happens to me like a lot. So I'll be in a coffee shop and I'll start to hear like some hushed whispers over at the table to my left or something. And and there'll be like people trying to like inconspicuously turn their head and look, while like not drawing attention to themselves. And sometimes I'll just go up to the table and be like, "Hi guys, my name's Nick. I've been told a lot that like I look like Neil," and they all freak out, right? Because they're just like, "How did you know that's what we were talking about?" And I'm like, "Well, because basically you're not nearly as inconspicuous as you think you are." But one of these days, I think I should go up and just introduce myself as Neil Patrick Harris and just like see them,
You should. You totally should.
You should just sign a napkin like with his name and just drop it on their table. That would be hilarious.
Indeed. Yeah, well, I mean, these are good ideas. I need better ideas because I feel like I haven't really, capitalized on this lookalike thing nearly enough.
There's this urban legend story about a man being at a restaurant and Bill Murray is at that restaurant and he walks over to the man's table, takes a French fry off of his plate, eats it and says, "No one will ever believe you," and walks away.
Oh, that's rich.
That's what you have to do always from now on.
Yeah, except like I'll be on the 6 o'clock news like, "Man arrested for thinking he looked like some..."
For French fry theft.
Have you ever tweeted at Neil Patrick Harris and been like, do people come up to you all the time and say you look like Nick Byrd?
Nick Byrd.
That's another good one. You guys are good at this.
This is happening to me everywhere.
I think some of my family members have tweeted at him to like say that I look like him or something like that.
That's awesome. Well, we have had a great time talking with you, and we hope you'll come back again and chat with us another time, and that you keep sending us your ideas because we've gotten some great ideas from you and articles and things like that. So,
well, thanks for the podcast. I'm a big fan, and it's been a real pleasure to talk to you guys, and I look forward to the next episode.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, I never knew about that access to journals, that libraries paid millions to publishers, and about that difference with open access.
Yeah, you just don't think about that, but that's really interesting.
Yeah. A couple things I just want to circle back on before we go. Number one, I don't think we made it clear that Blaze article, our official stamp on that one is spin. It's not that the information was untrue, but it was presented in a way that fits the bias of a very conservative reader. And there were inconsistencies like calling it a liberal publication, which it's not. And the fact that gender studies was not actually hurt by this hoax. Except for to make a lot of people giggle over the word penis like a bunch of times.
Yeah, well, whenever something is like referring to something, like when you see liberal publication, that's just kind of like your red flag, or if you see conversely like conservative publication, well, I mean, I don't know, if I saw something calling Fox News, like, oh, conservative outlet Fox News, I guess, I don't know, use your judgment.
Right.
We can't sort everything out for you.
if it's whatever, blah, blah, blah. If it's Confederate Flag Weekly, it's probably a conservative publication.
Weekly, wow.
There's a lot going on. Especially right now, for crying out loud, with all the statues and everything. Oh my gosh.
And also, apologies to Peter Boghossian. No, he's not always a jerk. He does some very good stuff. This was just a jerky thing. Yeah.
All right. This was my first interaction with him, so I was on the jerk train with him.
The other guy I don't know about, though. He's probably a jerk. It was probably all his idea.
So I wanted to talk real quick about this. So one concern that I have with what we've learned today is basically anyone could submit articles to these crap journals and get them published.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah, and I think as fake news evolves, that this is something to be aware of, because I feel like as fake news, like as people start to recognize it, they'll start to adapt and find new ways to trick people. And I could see sending in a study that you made up yourself into a journal, paying to get it published, and then sourcing it for your own article would be an evolution for fake news.
Yeah, that would be like turning it up to 11. And if people are getting wise, then they're going to have to adapt and evolve to get their message, their propaganda out there.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that if you see something that says like published in a scientific journal, that doesn't hold the weight that it used to.
Yeah.
So you do have to look into what that journal was and who published it and what was it about. Otherwise, anybody can just send in their paper that they made up to Cognate Social Sciences and they'll publish it.
It's just going to be harder with all the things we talked about today and with the internet and just everything to know if what you're looking at is reasonable or not.
So is it fitting to begin and end the episode with a wow and fuck?
So very, very fitting.
Well, speaking of wow moments, you have to tell me more about this penis song, because...
Oh my gosh.
What in the world, Elizabeth, are you listening to?
Hey, it's not my fault that you are square.
Okay, I looked up that song. It's from 1992.
Hell yeah, it is.
What were you doing in 1992?
I was being cool in 1992.
Okay, well, I had never heard of that song. You definitely blindsided me with that one.
Like all the other cool people in 1992, I was listening to King Missile.
I think in 1992, I was listening to Nirvana.
Well, yeah, I wasn't just listening to one thing. That was like the Nirvana crowd was also listening to that. Like the real Nirvana crowd, not like the lame-o squares, but like the cool people who wore flannel in July in Texas because it was the cool thing to do. Yeah, that was me. Oh, yeah.
I'm going to tell you, I moved from Utah to Iowa in 91. And you wouldn't believe this, but Utah is actually had a pretty progressive music scene. Mm-hmm. And you had a really good alternative music station. And so when I moved to Iowa, it was all like Metallica, heavy metal. People, like, they had never heard of Nine Inch Nails. They'd never heard of, the Pixies, for crying out loud.
Oh, see, that is just like, that is the true backwoods back there. You don't know who the Pixies are? Oh, yeah. God help you.
I was miserable for a couple of years until finally, I remember, like, it finally caught up. And I remember somebody listening to like a Nine Inch Nails album and they were like, have you heard this? And I'm like, 6 years ago. I have the tape in my car.
The tape. See, kids, for our young listeners, they were these little rectangular devices made out of plastic. And you used to stick them in your car and they had tape inside them and it used to get all screwy and...
Yeah, and you'd have to wind them back up with a pen.
Yeah,
when they got messed up, which happened.
Oh, yeah.
So I think you have some news for us about one of our favorite websites. What's going on?
Yeah, I got some news. I got a notice from a friend of mine that Snopes has a GoFundMe because they're having a bit of a problem with their advertisers and some legal issues. And our incredible reference that we use to help us identify fake stories and come to the truth is in peril. And it's now, if you find the GoFundMe for Snoops.com, that's something else. That's don't give them money.
We have verified the Snopes crowdfund is correct and true. They are raising money. Snoops is my crowdfund. If you want to give money to it, I'll just put it towards this podcast.
That's like whenever you're like all tired and you're typing and you like type like outlook.com and like it goes to this website, you know, that's like, oh, click here for your Windows problems. You're like, huh? And then you're like accidentally giving money to like whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, so I guess there's a divorce happening and there's a legal battle with something they hooked up with a company that was trying to help them modernize, and that company and the founder are in a legal battle.
Oh, I didn't know. So
yeah, I read an article about it. So he's trying to raise this money. Yeah, so the original founders were married.
Yeah, it was like a mom and pop operation, which is like one of the coolest things. They used to just like run this by themselves back in the day. For a long time.
Yeah, so now in 2014 they decided to separate and get divorced, and so they basically he had to buy her half of the company from her, and this other entity got involved because he wanted to modernize how they were doing things, and it was kind of like supposed to be like a support thing, but now they're kind of holding it hostage and they can't update things, and they're being, it's going through the legal process. So he's raising this money to basically just keep the lights on while they're paying for all these legal fees and stuff and trying to get through this kind of messy situation. And it sounds like it'll be fine, but it's going to take a while. And so they're...
No, we need them.
We definitely need them.
Like the world needs them. Yeah. Wow. What a mess. Well, you want to post a link, Beth?
Yeah, we can do that for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So find that link on Twitter or Facebook at
podcast at stop talking. I'm going to do it.
Yes, ma'am.
At podcastfakenews@gmail.com or at podcastfakenews on Twitter.
You can email us anything at podcastfakenews@gmail.com. And until next time, we got anything else?
Why didn't you tell them about the Facebook instead of talking about the Gmail twice?
I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
Maybe I want some emails. Shut up.
Send Beth some emails, folks.
Yeah, come on. I'm bored. No. Well, the Facebook and Twitter are the same handle, Podcast Fake News.
Yeah, but there is a Facebook. So we just want to make sure that folks know that that's a thing.
Definitely.
Yeah. So until next time,
spread jam,
not lies.